Ooh, can you feel the thrills and chills of maybe the single most scary retro review this Christmas? You've come to the right place. Sealed, bagged, and possibly infectious, I intercepted a mall Santa drop-off for this single game. It is D2 for the Sega Dreamcast, and been looking forward to showing you guys this. Worth about 3 cans of Dr. Pepper. It's a seriously big investment. Not everyone's going to be able to handle it. But seriously, this is going to be a hardcore horror game for the best system ever made. Link in the description. I've got a disclaimer form for each of your parents to fill out. I can't continue with this episode unless I've got consent to give you nightmares until next Christmas. This is D2. There is also an American version of D2. There's a lot more English in it, but I really enjoyed the Japanese version. It was accessible to play, and the box art is just so much cooler. We've got a calendar that ties into the main story. 4 discs long, even though the game isn't that long on its own. There's a lot of cutscenes. It's basically half interactive movie that you play through, and the other half is some of the best Christmas survival horror ever. So we're gonna boot this thing up, poke it, and see how it responds. This is D2 for the Sega Dreamcast. And Merry Christmas, guys. So to kick us off, I guess we're going to start with disc 4. That makes sense, right? This is where all the opening cinematics are contained. It's got all the movies that we'll need to get started. Obviously, I've got the Japanese version. The gameplay itself is accessible enough without going through all the story and having all the English translations. If you do like story in your video games, I seriously recommend checking out a guide online. I'll leave a link in the description to go through the story yourself and really try and understand what's happening, or do what I do. Just make it up as you go. The world is your oyster, and I mean, this game does plenty of world building on its own. You may as well add a little bit to it yourself, a bit of creativity. So let's get started on disc 4. So D2 actually is set on Christmas Day. You're flying over Canada. It is white, it is beautiful, it is cold. As far as horror games go, it's pretty Christmassy, and it finishes on New Year's Eve. So if you don't have anything else to do for Christmas, or your family just really hates you, you could actually start playing this game on Christmas Day and finish it by New Year's Eve and go through the journey with the characters if you wanted. And just be aware that for a horror game, it's actually kind of grim. There's no Christmas lights, no singing Santas, and there's only one Christmas tree in the entire game that I found. Don't expect to get your Christmas cheer here, but if you're after a white Christmas, D2 is my #1 recommendation, especially for all your Australians just out there sweating, dying in the heat. As always, a moment's silence for all the mall Santas out in the Australian summer. God bless you guys, you're doing a stand-up job. I'm not going to dwell too much on the story here. There's just so much of it, and the game plays in like a really unique way. You don't need all the story to play the game. I've got the Japanese version and I did just fine. I actually downloaded the script after finishing the game. I'm thinking to myself, you know, what's it all about? What have I missed? Even if you've got the English version, I recommend downloading the script if it's something that you're really interested in understanding more of, because this game, it crams in like ancient civilizations and ancient races of people, evolving technologies, sacred rituals, drug abuse. Like, it's got so many concepts and themes that they're trying to plug together. But I guess the main takeaway in the game once you get to the end is that life is precious. And I can get behind that message, but at the same time, we are exploding and blowing up and taking down all these aliens that are just blossoming out of people on the side of this mountain. And look, I'm just a guy hanging out in my bedroom trying to avoid chores and playing wicked video games right here on Christmas Eve. Games that my mum better never find out that I actually been playing. This story stuff, it feels incredibly wanky. A lot of it just goes over my head, and I don't have the capacity, nor do I want to have the capacity to really sit down and dissect and understand this game and all the messages that it's trying to present. I understand that it's supposed to be something bigger, like a work of art. This game is taking control and taking you for a ride and taking you on a journey, but I really could get behind the gameplay. The game itself is really beautifully done, and it's got this really creepy atmosphere that I really enjoyed. I recommend downloading the script. I recommend trying to understand the story, but don't dwell on it too much, because there is seriously a lot of fun to be had here, even if you've only got the Japanese version. And seriously, with all the magic that's happening in this game, they still can't explain to me how Santa can get on a sleigh, deliver a bunch of presents in one night, and still not... I mean, aliens are taking over this whole region in Canada. How did he miss that? How did he not see what was happening down there on the ground? I think there's some really big plot holes in D2. If they can't involve Santa in this Christmas game somehow, then I think they've really dropped the ball. D2's come from a production studio called Warp back in the 90s and the early 2000s in Japan. Largely considered the founder Kenji Eno's magnum opus. They weren't out to create games that I guess were easy to play. They were out to create these experiences. And the way that they did this was taking away control from the gamer itself and really making you sit down and play through and experience these games how they wanted you to experience them. They kept the pace slower, they really made you investigate, and then they inserted these scenes of high action to really keep gamers on their toes in between. With a name like D2, you're probably assuming there's a D somewhere, and absolutely there is. You may have even seen it without even knowing. D was available on the Sony PlayStation and the Sega Saturn. It was one of Warp's early games. The only real connection that D has with D2 is that for each of the Warp games, they use the same digital actors, and they even showed up again in Enemy Zero for the Sega Saturn. And these games really highlight, especially Enemy Zero, that the player really comes second after the experience that the game is trying to create. In Enemy Zero, and look, I haven't played this game all the way through, I'm not that dedicated, but it's a really interesting experience, and they really set it up to make it look like the Alien movie. So that was a really big inspiration for Kenji when he went into producing this particular game. But the aliens that you face, they're invisible, and there are so many different limitations on how and when you can use your weapon to blast these invisible aliens. So you're using a scanner to try and tell where the aliens are, you know, on the stages, but you're also trying to uncover the mystery and trying to escape the ship because everyone is starting to die because of these aliens, but you can't see them. You can't just go around blasting. You actually need to time your shots, and it's an experience. These games, these warp games, they're all experiences, and as a gamer, we really come second. It's a story that Kenji wanted to tell, and if you're willing to play one of his games, he's taking control. He's not around anymore, rest in peace, but his games, his rules, you're really taken for a ride, and that's something that you don't often get to experience in gaming. So it's one reason to go back and check out these warp games. And D2 was, in my personal opinion, much easier to get into, to play, to really get behind and finish. So considering this is Warp and also Kenji Eno's magnum opus, it makes sense that they wanted to start things off gracefully, artistically, and really draw the gamer into this experience that they were trying to create. So, of course, the game starts off with tentacle rape. You guys can't see this. I don't know if we should be watching this. If my mum finds out that this is online, there's not going to be a next Christmas episode, but this is actually a really good point to highlight some of the differences between the American version and the Japanese version. This stuff was actually censored in the American version. Again, I'm a big fan of the Japanese version. I already talked about the box art, but having the censorship, you know, it bugs people. You don't want the experience to be censored, and when it comes to a game like D2 that was really set up to create this experience, and these are the sort of things that Kenji wanted to make people feel uncomfortable about. These aliens, I guess, just like most other alien movies, they are invading people. They are taking over people's lives and making them sick and infecting them. It's a virus, it's a disease, it's rape, there's consent, there's... Again, so many concepts that he's trying to touch on and explore, and it's all done through a video game, which I think is pretty impressive. Like, again, I don't 100% get behind the story, but the fact that he's trying to explore these themes, yeah, it's kind of cool. Tentacle rate. Merry Christmas, guys. Thanks for tuning into the Leftover Culture Review. So obviously, if Mum finds out that I've got this game, I'm grounded, and if she finds out that I reviewed it online for all you guys to see, she's probably going to call the cops and get me arrested. There's not going to be a Christmas next year, so please mail all your fan letters to Nana Bruiser. leftoverculturereview@gmail.com. Also expect calls to each of your mums as well. My mum's a little bit like that. She likes to keep things a little bit formal and, you know, give the parents a call to talk about her son's bad attitude online. So we've talked pretty extensively about the cutscenes here in D2. This game is actually broken up into a few different gameplay types to help create that story, however. The first person exploration is like a consoleized point and click adventure. Again, it's broken up with cutscenes of opening cupboards, finding items, fiddling with doors, sighing, scratching your butt. I guess it reflects sort of what Shenmue were doing when they were bringing these real-world experiences into a video game. They were slowing down the pace, they were guiding the player to where they needed to go, and everything you did as a player was measured, it was on purpose, it was intentful, because you didn't want to sit through another 20-second clip of this person sighing or getting frustrated again. It's easily one of the more frustrating design decisions, especially early on when you're coming to grips with the game and the exploration mechanics. But it's a very clear sign that, yeah, this game wasn't really made for you. Warp were invested in creating this experience and you're coming along for the ride. But this is one game that hasn't been watered down for every casual gamer, and depending on what your doing in the game, it starts to shift focus again. When you're exploring inside, you're set in this first-person predetermined path, clicking around to find items and moving forward. Considering this is quite an early Dreamcast title, I felt these close-up sections, they look good, and they really sit alongside with what Sega were doing with Shenmue. Also guys, no skipping these cutscenes. You press the start button, the game's gonna pause. It lets you wait to watch the rest of the cutscene. How thoughtful! Thank you, Warp. And look, the first person exploration is fine, it works. Once you step outside into the snowy mountains, the view shifts into like this third person perspective where you get to explore. It becomes an action adventure game. It's amazing to see this game shift from such a beautiful but restrictive perspective into this sparse, expansive open world, and then when you use your weapons, you again get pulled back into a turret type view, dealing out as much damage from a fixed position. And for a game that's all about this woman who's in a plane crash and then a coma on Christmas Day, you're actually pretty well equipped. There's a bunch of weaponry to find out there in the wilderness and plenty of aliens to shoot. So it's getting pretty obvious that this game is massive. It feels incredible, it looks incredible, it really is an incredible experience, and you are in the wilderness of Canada, but the maps aren't too big. You get rewarded for destroying these aliens, you get to level up, you get to become stronger, so it's well worth checking out the maps, finding all the nooks, crannies and crevices, and collecting some really cool loot along the way. To help you out while you're playing the game, the VMU actually gives you like a compass right there in your hand that you can look down and check and just make sure you're heading in the right direction. I really love the Dreamcast VMU and what it was able to do and bring to some of these titles, and seeing how it was used here in D2, being used as a compass, it makes so much sense for the game. So I came to D2 mainly because I wanted to experience the gameplay. I was really interested in Warp Studios and what Kenji Eno was doing. I really liked the idea of D2, especially with the White Christmas vibe and the story that they were trying to create right here on the Dreamcast. There are some really amazing survival horror games on the Dreamcast, and D2 was a real highlight when I was checking them all out. So I wanted to review it. I wanted to check it out despite how my mum might feel about me reviewing something like this for Christmas. It is an awesome horror-themed Christmas title that I really recommend anyone who's interested in that sort of stuff has the opportunity to check out. Whether you get the Japanese version or the the English version, I do still recommend playing through with a guide. Obviously there's a lot of story and a lot of stuff crammed into this title. I just really think that if you want to experience the game, you really want to understand what's happening to a certain degree. You don't need to understand all of the story and all of the lore contained here to really enjoy it. But there are some really great resources online to help you understand the story and really get the most out of this game. So guys, I really appreciate you watching. Honestly, all the best to you, your family, your friends over this Christmas season. I really need you to stay safe. Come back again next year so I can keep making these videos. It's important, right? Thank you so much for all your support over the year. I do really appreciate it. I notice those comments. I read every single comment that comes through, even if I don't get a chance to respond to each and every one. I really do make the effort to. Thank you so much for the support, for everything. Merry Christmas, guys. Here's to a really prosperous 2019. You've earned it, guys. Cheers. Mall Madness Christmas Rush. It is one level where you basically need to get your Santa photos printed and you need to fight through a whole horde, a whole mall full of Christmas style bad guys as well as the regular shoppers and security guards. It's intense, it's Christmassy, and it's available for free over on the leftoverculturereview.com. So if you wanted to check out Mall Madness Christmas Rush, please go ahead and do it. It's a little gift from me to you, totally free. Thank you so much for tuning in. Thank you for spending your Christmas with me, And until next time, for some more leftover culture, cheers.
Merry Christmas.
데이비드!